Well, very pleased, because this country has led the way, really. £2.5 billion worth of support last year, and a further similar amount to come. And the first country to pledge tanks, Challenger 2s, which will be a very effective resource for the Ukrainians. But we do need to get this weaponry over there as quickly as possible as a collective effort. The German Leopard tank is very effective, and the Abrams from America will be very effective too. And then, of course, we've got to train up the Ukrainians to be able to use these in double quick time so they can get them out of the battlefield as fast as possible.
President Zelensky has done an interview with Kay Burley, and he said in it, overall, I'm very thankful to the world for the support for Ukraine. But speaking frankly, the number of tanks and the delivery time to Ukraine is critical. I mean, he obviously thinks that, look, pledging the tanks is the easy bit, but it's getting them over there that's difficult. I mean, how long could it take?
Well, as I say, I'm no expert, unfortunately, on how long it will take the Germans or the Americans to get that hardware over there. But clearly, he's absolutely right. This needs to happen at pace if we are to get them into place. Not just get them into place, but get the Ukrainians trained up on how to use what is certainly the case of the Leopard, and I mean, the Abrams is a very sophisticated tank. So there's quite a job to do to train people up to use these, and that's why he's absolutely right. We need to get this stuff over there as quickly as possible.
The Kremlin has come back to say these tanks will burn down like all the others, and the Russian embassy in Berlin has reacted to Germany's decision, saying it's an extremely dangerous one and an escalation of the conflict. Well, is there a risk it provokes Russia?
Well, Russia has been using this language, of course, right from the beginning of what is an illegal invasion of Ukraine, which has brought huge misery to its people. And we need to really see this through. And we know that the Russians are now looking to recruit hundreds of thousands of additional reservists to bring in as the weather changes as we approach the spring. So we've got to be ready for that. So this kind of rhetoric is nothing new, I'm afraid, but our resolve must be absolute.
I was interested to see Boris Johnson in Ukraine again on Sunday, meeting President Zelensky. How do you feel about the former Prime Minister still being the face of the UK's relationship with Ukraine?
Well, he is one part of the UK's face, as you put it. And, of course, I think one has to applaud what Boris Johnson did in making sure that our country was right in the vanguard of supporting Ukraine in its darkest hour. We were one of the first countries to step up to the plate. And, you know, he clearly feels very passionate about this, and he's over there lending his moral support and so on. He's very close to President Zelensky. So I think that's very positive. And that doesn't detract, of course, from what the government is doing and what this Prime Minister is doing, who is equally committed to making sure that we stand by Ukraine and its people.
I'm interested to talk to you about your brief, but just before we do, the Prime Minister's asked his new ethics advisor to investigate whether Nadhim Zahawi broke the ministerial code. How long do you expect that to take?
I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that they won't and he won't want to hang around, albeit that he will want to be very thorough.
So we're talking weeks rather than months?
I really don't know, but I think in a reasonable period of time. I think this is something that one way or another we need to have closure on. The Prime Minister will want to know all the facts so that when he gets those facts, he's in a position to take a decision, whatever that may be. But we do need to leave the ethics advisor to do his work and make sure that it is thorough and that all the facts are presented to the Prime Minister. That's the most important.
You say there about the Prime Minister taking the decision. So if Laurie Magnus finds that Nadhim Zahawi did breach the ministerial code, will Rishi Sunak sack him?
I think that would be a very difficult finding, but I can't, and it wouldn't be right for me to attempt to prejudge the outcome of this based on hypotheticals. We don't know what the findings will be, and until we do, I think we have to wait for those to come forward and then wait to decide to see what the Prime Minister decides.
When you say difficult finding, what do you mean by difficult finding?
Well, clearly no minister will want to be in a position where they're found to be in breach of the ministerial code, but as to the consequences of any particular outcomes, A, I can't predict what those would be, and it'd be wrong for me to speculate, and B, it wouldn't be right for me to try and prejudge the Prime Minister's decisions based on theoretical outcomes which
I guess the difficulty is, though, you know, we're being asked to be quiet until the inquiry reports. We don't know how long that's going to be. And also for public confidence in the inquiry, surely it's important to say that everything is on the table, that if he's found a breach of the code, then there'll be consequences.
Well, as I say, Sophie, I'm not in a position to start speculating as to what may or may not be established. But I think the Prime Minister is doing exactly the right thing, which was when he became aware of additional information that wasn't available to him at the time that he appointed Nadeem Zahawi to the Cabinet, he took prompt action in appointing his advisor and asking him to establish the facts. And that's what that advisor will do. We shouldn't rush him in that endeavour, because the most important thing is that it's done thoroughly. But I know that the Prime Minister will then look at those facts very carefully and decide what he decides to do.
I think it would be, would you agree it would be difficult if, as you say, if the inquiry does find a breach of the code, for the Prime Minister to allow Nadeem Zahawi to stay in his job?
No, I didn't say that. What I said was that if we had a situation where any minister, or indeed any parliamentarian of any party, finds themselves in a position where they breached the ministerial code, then of course that's a difficult situation. But it depends on what it's for and the degree and so on and so forth. But as I say, I come back to the substantial point, which is that we have to let the advisor now carry out his work, have a thorough checking of all the facts, presenting those facts to the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister then taking his decision.
Is there an argument that all high-profile politicians, members of the Cabinet, should publish their tax returns?
I don't personally think so, because I think there are some things in life which are justifiably private. I think medical records, for example, would be part of that as well.
Even if, though, you're the guys deciding how much tax everyone else should pay, though. Is there not a different degree of privacy?
There is a procedure that the Cabinet Office goes through when the Prime Minister is forming his or her Cabinet, and those kind of issues of propriety and ethics and so on.
It's a bit questionable if they're thorough enough in light of recent
yes, I mean,
information.
they are drawn together through a variety of different means, including conversations with the prospective Cabinet Minister, him or herself. So it is part of a process. So I do think those things matter, but do I think that politicians generally should be sort of summoned to publish all their tax affairs, their financial affairs, their health records or whatever else it may be? I think there is a limit to what we should expect public figures to... But others have different views on that.
Now, there have been a lot of reports this week, talking to you with your ministerial hat on, about a plan to raise the state retirement age to 68. What's going on? What's the truth?
Well, the truth of the matter is as it has been for some time now, which is that it is my responsibility to look at taking that decision in conjunction with others, looking at the various reports that have been around that issue and taking into account a whole balance of different elements when I come to that decision, including how long people are expecting to live going forward into the future and how that's changing through time, intergenerational fairness, impact on different protected groups and so on. And I will be coming forward with that decision, as I'm statutorily required to, no later than May of this year. So that's work that I'm actively considering at the moment.
According to these reports, Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, wants to bring the retirement age forward. Wants to raise the retirement age, which makes sense because it means that he gets more money in the Treasury. You apparently are worried about the plan, potentially because of a fall in life expectancy projections, which make it politically unfeasible, according to reports. Is that your
According to reports? Whose reports?
Well, that's why I'm asking you.
Well, I've no idea where this comes from. That's why I'm asking you to try and find out the truth. Well, as I say, I can't say any more, and in fact, it would be totally improper for me to start speculating as to where I might want this to land.
Okay.
Considering the evidence, I've set out the basic...
I'm going to have one more go.
Okay.
Previous reports have said that people should spend roughly a third of their life retired. Do you think that's the right ballpark?
I think that's one of the metrics, amongst many others, that one considers when looking at this decision. How long is it reasonable for somebody to have later on in life as a proportion of their life expectancy? But it's only one element of it. And as I say, tempting though it is, I'm not going to start being drawn into specific thoughts.
Understood.
If that's all right.
Now, when we last spoke, we talked about your efforts to try and get more people back into work.
Yeah.
I know that's a big part of what you're doing,
yes.
Including the over 50s, many of whom have taken early retirement. I guess my question is, if you don't have to work, why would you?
Well, one of the reasons why people over the age of 50 but below retirement age step out of the workforce is they've taken a calculation that they've got enough assets and income and money to see themselves through, perhaps indeed to the rest of their lives. But what we know is that if you were born in 1970, you've got a reasonable chance of reaching 100 in reasonable health. So I think there is therefore a possibility that some of those that have taken that decision would benefit from additional information.
So you're saying that they've made the wrong calculation,
well,
effectively?
I think it's important that everybody that makes the calculation does it based on as much information as possible, and they go into that with their eyes open. So I think there may be scope going forward for providing more of that information so people can make a more informed choice. We have actually seen a slight decrease in economic inactivity more recently, and a lot of that has been amongst the over 50s who perhaps are beginning to think about those things, particularly as times have been a bit tougher.
OK, thank you very much for being on the programme. Thank you.